All right. Well, welcome back, everyone. This is the Niner Empire Show. We're back with episode three. The Niners had their draft, or the NFL draft happened, and so we're going to be covering the Niners picks. Um, Kind of a pretty hot commodity going on right now in just the NFL media world, just about the draft, but particularly the Niners draft and how they go against what um, so-called experts and fans want for their players. And if you've watched the previous episode, you will know that we have completely whiffed on every pick that we mocked um, in the first couple rounds. So in classic Niner fashion, they totally threw us a curveball. We should have expected a curveball given how they have drafted in recent history. So that actually brings up my first question, Addy, is before we kind of get into the players, I do want to ask you what is your general feeling about the Niners drafting strategy, and how do you reflect on this draft class? And does it give you hope? Is it concerning? Is considering the history of the Niners drafting in the last couple years?
I think that when you look at certain drafts, like specifically, I would say the 2022 and 2023 draft, there's a decent chance. I mean, I think Jair Brown will probably still be on the 53-man roster, but there's low-key a chance that not a single player from those two drafts will be on the roster except for Brock Purdy. And it's only been 3 years since that draft. That's pretty bad. But I will say, I do think historically, like it's interesting because we've drafted a lot of all pros in later rounds and a lot of good players in later rounds. I think our fans have gotten used to this idea that in rounds 4 through 7, we're just always going to find all pro players. That's not necessarily true. And I think when you compare it to the success of other teams as well, like with exception to certain teams, for the most part, a lot of teams miss on their draft picks. They don't plan out to be the players that they expect them to be, like maximizing their potential. Not every player is going to be a superstar. I do think those two draft classes by us deserve criticism, but you look back at last year's draft, you look at the draft 2 years ago, we've gotten some quality players, and not even just in those later rounds, but in the first two rounds as well, the first three rounds, even if you will.
Yeah.
So I think that this draft class excites me because I think that they were drafting with a little bit of a different mentality this time, trying to find schematic fits, trying to find players that they could plug in and possibly have an impact early, and also filling gaps that we have on our team. I think that with those three things in mind, it makes me a lot more excited for this draft class than if we were just to draft the best player available at every pick. I also think that they were moving strategically with like understanding which players they wanted, trading down to those spots when they could, not feeling the pressure to take the best possible player, the player that the media said that they should take at a certain spot. And I think that that gives me hope that they're at least. I think that it's kind of interesting that like everybody thinks that the big board or the consensus should be like almost like a rule book that you go by, like this guy's higher than the certain draft spot that we're at, so we should draft him. I think when you really ignore that and you look at the players for their skill and their quality and their fit on the team, then I think that's a smarter draft strategy than just going, blank by the big board, by wherever players are ranked by the consensus.
Yeah.
Um, it's interesting. I think there's a lot of coaches that have players ranked differently. Like there's some players in the top 15 picks that some coaches had lower than players in the later rounds. So it just depends on how you view the player and their skill set. And I feel confident that they were doing their homework in this draft.
Yeah. I like that. I like that perspective. I think it's really interesting to look at kind of what has social media has created this space where everyone feels like they can be an expert in analyzing players and what is best for the teams, and feels like, part of being a fan is having an opinion, and that's totally fine, right? We're fans, we have opinions on certain players, but we're also, our job is not looking at tape 24/7 in scouting players and looking at where they fall and all this kind of stuff. And even people who do these mock drafts and look at that, they are not analyzing to the specific way that a scout from a particular team is scouting, right? Like you brought up a good point of what is it that the Niners are doing differently, especially in this recent draft class, and we'll talk about the picks soon, is, and we even talked about it in last episode, right? Was that we wanted them to fill holes, to fill gaps where they needed to get younger, they needed to get more athletic, and they do that. We'll talk about the picks, but they absolutely drafted with the intention of realizing, and it even goes back to even just last year when you look at, well, when it came to playing against the Seahawks and what was our biggest area of weakness, not just injuries. Injuries was obviously a big thing, but it was speed. It
Hmm.
was physicality. It was just the ability to match that level of athleticism that we didn't have last year. And in this draft, we look at the players that we drafted. We drafted just pure athletes, not necessarily players that are have all the intangible skills or necessarily need to be the all-around player. They fill a specific need, a specific hole with athleticism that can develop as typically is what happens in the NFL is you draft athletes that then you can coach to
Hmm.
become fundamentally good at certain positions, right?
Exactly.
So I think it's a really interesting draft that we have, and we'll talk about the picks. But my last thing that I want to say too is you brought up of well the draft history, just kind of like within the last 5 years, and I think people forget that Trey Lance screwed our draft for 2 years. I mean, 22 and 23, our highest pick was around three. Was round three. We
We
were
could
picking
have
in the
got
third
him
round,
or
right?
Parsons in
And
the draft.
yeah, exactly. And even from there, like there's not they were bad drafts, don't get me wrong, and we didn't pick great players. They're not starters. We just traded D Winters. He was a 23 round pick. We had a shitty Jake Moody kicker. Jair Brown is the only one who's still playing, and even then, he's not necessarily like, oh my God, this is an all-pro player. But you look at the drafts before Trey Lance and even the 21 draft itself. We had Hufanga, Lenore, Elijah Mitchell. These are Jalen Moore. Those are four players right there who all Aaron Banks. That's five players right there who started on the Niners and were productive players, right? It's just the two drafts after Trey Lance that were just complete whiffs. And now we're looking back at, well, 24, 25 drafts, and specifically 24. You have Ricky, you have Ronaldo Green, you have Dominic Pooney, Mustafa. Those are just the top four picks right there are all starting players,
Hmm.
right? When healthy. All of them are starters. You have Isaac Guerendo was a contributing player not last year, but the year before that. He's kind of resorted to kind of not being great, but he's a special teams player. He still contributes on special teams,
Hmm.
right? Jacob Cowing hasn't panned out. He's just been injured. He was supposed to be great last year, was injured, so we can't really put a label on him. And then you have Jalen Bethune. Jalen Bethune was the seventh round pick who basically had to get the green dot and played very productively considering the pressure that he was under to play with as a seventh round pick,
Yeah,
right? So
replacing Fred Warner.
that was yeah, exactly. That was replacing the probably the greatest linebacker in football. He's definitely up there.
Hmm.
Um, and he did a pretty successful job. I'm not saying he's an all pro. He's not fantastic, but
Hmm.
we're acting like these are not productive players, that these are not good players. These are good players that we drafted. And
Hmm.
then last year, I mean, we had very productive rookies for the most part. We had Upton Stout, who's great. CJ West and Alfred Collins kind of felt like they were kind of just that's the other thing that I think is not we're totally going on a rant here, and that's fine. We'll get into the picks.
No,
But
that's it.
what I think is also really important to know is we had to put rookies in positions last year that we didn't necessarily draft them for,
Hmm.
right? We we came into the season where we looked at Alfred Collins and CJ West is there are going to be these rotational players. They're going to come in and just give us juice. They had to start like by what? Week 3, week 4? Because we were devastated on the defensive line. And so when you put rookies in those positions, it's great that they got reps. I'm happy that they were able to get reps, and you saw the progression every week and how much better they got by the end,
Hmm.
especially Upton Stout, right? This was a rookie that relatively might have been struggling a little bit early on. You saw that he was undersized, he was not physical enough, he was jumping routes, he was getting burnt. By the end, he was probably our best, by far, probably our most impactful defensive player
Hmm.
as a rookie, right? Michael, it was it maybe a little crazy to pick him 11 for basically being good at one particular skill, which is run defense? Yeah, maybe. But was he a dominant run defender that we really needed last year when he was playing? Yeah, he was freaking amazing, and that's one thing to like look at is like if you have a particular skill set that fills that need, and they did that last year too with Michael, especially. They looked at we are terrible up front at stopping the run. We need to draft big bodies who are good against the run, and they did that, right? And we were much better against the run last year, even with the injuries.
Yeah.
And Michael, we'll see. We'll see coming off, a devastating injury, so he's also a question mark.
Mm.
Um, Jordan James, Jordan Watkins, Marquise Siegel.
We didn't, except for Siegel, we didn't even get to really see Jordan James or Jordan Watkins at
We
all.
didn't get to see some of these players. They kind of got redshirted, and that's typical in a in a Kyle Shanahan offense, or just team in general, where there's
The
just you
doghouse.
have. That's my last point, and then we'll get to the draft. Is I think there is this idea that there's a good point here. Do you know who Saquon Barkley's backup is? No. You can't even name who Saquon Barkley's backup is. So when people get agitated at being like, why is Jordan James not getting the reps or playing football on our team? Why did we draft him in round 5 to play? It's because you have one of the greatest running backs on your team who can do it all. Why would you take off an all-pro running back who damn near won MVP, was getting MVP votes the last 2 years he was healthy? Why would you take off that impactful of a player for a rookie? You're just not going to, right? That's just how it is. Like you go to any other team, right? And that's Saquon Barkley is an example, but any other team that has a star player where you are not going to jeopardize taking out such an impactful player just so that a rookie can get minutes. That's just not how it works, you
Mhm.
know?
Yeah.
Um, okay, that's our rant, y'all. If you watched this far, I appreciate you staying. We're gonna actually start about the episode now. So, I want to talk to you about our first pick, round two, pick 33 overall, wide receiver Stribling. I almost said Sterling. It's like Sterling from the soccer Sterling. Dejon Stribling. Tell me about him. What do you like? What do you dislike? How do you feel about the pick?
The first thing that jumps off the tape, and if you look at his athletic profile, he's incredibly fast. And one thing about his speed too is there's a lot of players that when they get the ball in their hands, it takes them a moment to get to their top speed. He's a very quick to his breakaway speed. You got arguably last year, like his two best games were against Georgia.
Hmm.
And he was out there catching the ball on hitch routes, burning 4.38 corners, making them look a lot slower than him. He has great breakaway speed. He's by far probably the best blocking wide receiver in the class. If you look up his tape, he's out there pancaking corners and not even just pancaking them, but like it looks like he's really trying to embarrass people out there. I mean,
Hmm.
I saw one clip in his film where he knocks a dude on his ass. The dude's literally crawling on the floor trying to get up and he just straight up shoves him back down. Like he is a
He's a
competitive.
dog.
Yeah, exactly. And that immediately fits the culture. And that's something that, like you said earlier, our wide receiver room was slow as fuck last year. Our fastest receiver at one point was probably Kendrick Bourne. Not gonna do it.
Kind
Um,
of legend, Kevin Kendrick Bourne, man.
and also like his yard after the catch ability, he averaged almost 8 yards after every reception after the catch. Last
That's ridiculous.
That's yeah, that's ridiculous. And he's 6'2", he's around 200 pounds. When I watch him on tape, he reminds me a lot of like Jawan Jennings and Debo kind of combined together. He has that competitiveness when he's running after the catch to try and break tackles, to be physical with players. He's a physical receiver. He's very tough. He has strong hands at the catch point. And 17 yards per catch is awesome. We love seeing that. And one thing that I really liked about him is he was really efficient on dig routes. And when you think about us plugging him in and replacing Juwan Jennings, I mean, Mike Evans obviously is going to be wide receiver one. You got Ricky at wide receiver two, probably. But when you plug him in, knowing that Juwan Jennings was always so efficient on those dig routes on third down, this guy could immediately develop some chemistry with Brock Purdy on those plays. And I think that he has far better run after the catch ability than Juwan. He's far faster. I think it's a very good pick when you look at it from the perspective of how he's going to fit. And I know a lot of people were like, oh, we reached for him because he was supposed to go in round 4 or 5. There's actually reports that came out that there was teams that were going to
Yeah,
take him within the next 10, 15 picks because a lot of
seeing that
teams
today.
were trying to be quiet on his tape and how good he was. And I think that the Niners knew that they wouldn't be able to get him at a later pick at like 58 or wherever they were picking next. So
Yeah.
I think that he has competitive nature and he'll fit in culturally. My one concern with him, I think he needs to develop not his route running ability, but a little bit of nuance on routes, specifically against zone coverage. Watching his tape against man, he could beat people in man. But when it comes to running routes against zone, it comes with a little bit of patience at times and being able to control your pace and speed. I think that's something he'll have to develop a little bit because Ole Miss's offense had a very basic route tree last year. It was nothing crazy. He wasn't ever running any crazy routes. He was basically running 3 or 4 types of routes every single play. Um, and sometimes on his breaks, he's a little high hipped.
Mhm.
I think that against press corners who are patient against him and won't let him get that first step and burn them, in zone coverage, he might get slowed down a little bit. But I do think that that's not something that I'm looking at like, oh, this could be a big problem in the NFL. I think it's just going to take a little bit of time. And I think if he does get consistent wide receiver 3 or wide receiver 4 reps, he will develop that. I think it's possible that he's the wide receiver 3 going into the season because it seems like they're very high on him as a player.
Mhm.
The way he fits with the Niners, he's good in motion, obviously with his speed as well and his physicality. He played reps at running back at times at Ole Miss, which is like when you're
That's
looking at,
Debo.
yeah, exactly. It makes you think about Debo. Like I said earlier, he had high success on dig routes, slant routes, co routes, also screens. That's something that the Niners offense has been missing from the wide receiver position, at least
Mhm.
last year, and
Yeah.
especially since Debo kind of slowed down as like a threat on the field. Um, Being a physical blocker who's also incredibly fast, I think that's going to be awesome against Seattle's defense specifically because they play a lot of big nickel. I think that he's somebody who can be physical against their corners and their safeties and really get some nice blocks. I mean, you
Mhm.
think about Mike McDonald's first season coaching the Seahawks. The games that we beat them, we were really beating them on the physicality point. I remember watching Brandon Ayuk and Debo just punish fucking Devon Witherspoon, um, punishing the players that couldn't really tackle that well. Obviously, Tariq Woolen's not in that room anymore, and he was probably their biggest liability in the secondary. But I really think that this is a pick that they looked at that Seattle defense, like you said, and they're like, we need somebody who can take the top off, who can scare them in those single high safety looks, and can also punish them when they come out there with a lot of safeties and corners when we run the ball.
Yeah.
Um, One other thing that's kind of interesting about him, he played in 3 different types of offenses in college too. So he's displayed that he can be versatile across like different types of schemes. And he tended to have his best games against the better teams that they played. And in all the different teams that he played, I think in 3 of the 4 years that he was playing, he led his team in receiving yards. So he showed that he can really be efficient in different offenses. And I think that he's definitely going to be efficient in our offense. The more I watch his tape, the more excited I get to see him play.
It's good to hear. It's good to
Yeah.
hear. Good analysis for sure. I mean, what better offense to be in than a Kyle Shanahan offense, right? I mean, the thing when you bring up his concerns, right, about having a limited route tree and not being necessarily the greatest route runner, especially against zone, is well, Kyle Shanahan is getting freaking undrafted wide receivers open just based off plays alone, right? Like you look at it as like you don't need to be the greatest route runner to be in a Kyle Shanahan offense. You just need to get to the right spot,
I
um,
mean, bro,
and be fast.
Juwan and Debo really couldn't run routes
Yeah,
like that.
exactly. So, um, yeah, no, I like the I think I feel the same way. The more tape I've watched, the more confident I feel about the pick. And he's also, I think, unlike Ricky Pearsall, coming in a position where we have quality receivers. Like we actually have depth at receiver this upcoming year, where he's not in a position to be pressured to be like, we drafted you to be a wide receiver 1 this year. Like that's not the expectation. Come in, learn the offense, be a wide receiver 3, contribute in the run game, like that kind of thing, right? There's so much less pressure. Ricky had it differently. Well, Ricky kind of had it terribly in his rookie year because he got shot, so he missed that part. And then by the time he came back, Ayuk was injured. Debo was eating too many cheeseburgers. So there was no possible way for Ricky to be like, okay, we need you to be wide receiver one. Like it just wasn't going to happen. Christian McCaffrey was injured that season, and you saw what the potential was last year with Ricky too until the injury happened,
Yeah.
right? Um, but also now Ricky's not going to have to be a wide receiver one, and so there's so much more flexibility in Stribling as a rookie to come in and contribute and not need to put up like I'm not expecting him to go out there and average 50, 60 yards a game. If he does that, oh my God, it's a home run already if you're averaging 50, 60 yards a game as a rookie, you know, especially considering who the other receivers that you're playing with.
Mhm.
So yeah, good pick. All right, let's move on to round three, 70th overall. We drafted a defensive lineman, Romello Height. Tell me about him.
When when you watch this guy's tape, I think it's obvious that they drafted this guy purely with the mindset of understanding how athletic he is and how he can make an impact. I mean, the D line was shit last year, but in the beginning of the year, when we were able to run packages with Bosa and Mikel on the inside and Bryce Huff on the other side, we had a really strong pass rush. And I think having an explosive player opposite of Bosa definitely will help him in getting a lot more pressures and sacks. This guy has a really explosive first step. I think he has the quickest first step in the entire draft class. Um, Relentless pursuit. He has a lot of different pass rush moves that he likes to use. I mean, you can see tape of him destroying some of the offensive tackles that got picked in the first round. And I mean to
Jeez.
the point where they're basically arm barring him at the neck, just hoping, praying for dear life against him. Opposing speed to finish off sacks. He's not the type of guy that's going to get a pressure and get juked out. Um, he's been comfortable dropping back in coverage too in certain looks. I saw that on his tape a little bit that there was some moments where he was playing in the flat, dropping back in coverage, playing spy. Like I said, strong pass rush arsenal. He has a really good bend and hip flexibility. He's just a really athletic dude. Last year, he had a 92.6 pass rush grade. He had 62 pressures, 10 sacks, and 2 forced fumbles. Um, when it comes to his tape, my one kind of big concern about him, although he has the speed to get there and he does finish sacks often, he has a fairly high missed tackle rate for a defensive lineman.
Mm.
But that is something that we can develop. His missed tackle rate was 21.2%, and the average for an NFL defensive lineman is around 9%. So that's pretty bad, respectfully.
That
Um,
is pretty bad.
and the one thing I would say is he another concern is that he played 6 years in college, and he had only like 6.5 career sacks before that last
Mm.
season. But when I look at him on tape and you look at what other scouts thought of him, a lot of people had him really high as one of the best edge rushers in the draft. And people forget that David Bailey, his teammate who went second, this dude was on the opposite side of the line with him. So he definitely was providing some help for David Bailey to get his pressures and get his sacks.
Yeah.
Um, so I definitely think that this is a pick that they're looking at him like we can plug this dude in immediately in those NASCAR packages where we want just athletic people out there. I mean, if you think about a package with like him on the outside, Osa in the middle, Mikel in the middle, Bosa on the other side, that's going to be disgusting. That's going to be a disgusting pass rush. And he fits the scheme well. Raheem Morris likes to run a lot of 3-4. This dude played 3-4 last year. And when you look at him on tape, he's just obviously the type of defensive lineman that Raheem Morris likes. So the pick doesn't surprise me. I saw a lot of people that at first didn't really know how to think of the pick, like, oh, we might have reached because on the big board he was ranked a little later.
Hmm.
But if you look at the consensus amongst 49er fans watching his tape, everybody's getting really excited about this guy. And I think his pass rushing ability is really going to make a difference immediately for us in those packages.
Yeah, I like the pick. Um, as you're mentioning before, but also just in the sense of we talked about at the beginning was drafting for specific needs, and we needed a Bryce Huff replacement that we could put in on third down packages, right? Where this is not, we didn't draft Carmelo Height to be an every down defensive lineman.
Mhm.
We drafted him specifically to rush the quarterback. And last year we drafted players specifically to stop the run.
Mhm.
So it is a perfect combination of building your defensive line depth through having players that are dominant at a certain thing. In his case, you bring him in there and you tell him just get out, just get on the edge as fast as you possibly can, right? The missed tackle thing, I think is that's something that I don't necessarily know if it concerns me too much, just because of the style of play that we're going to use him in. Is if you're rushing the quarterback and you're forcing a quarterback outside the pocket, that pressure alone like allows others to get sacks or
Mm.
to get tackles. And I would rather have a player who is at least creating that pressure and creating um, that broken play than someone who is not creating pressure, right, and getting tackles on runs or anything like that. So if he's going to be used for that specific skill set, I'm looking forward to it, and hopefully he turns out to be a good player.
Yeah.
All right, our other round three pick, the Kyle Shanahan Classic running back in the third round. We drafted him 90th overall, Kalon Black. Definitely want to get your opinion on this because I think it's probably the most talked about player that we got in the draft. Tell me a little bit about him, what you think.
I think that if you look at this dude's tape and you don't think that we drafted him 90th overall, I think a lot of Niner fans would be more accepting of it and understand it. He has good vision between the tackles. He's a guy that excels in inside zone. Um, he's relatively fast. He reaches his top speed in just a few steps. The best skill that he probably has is his pass protection.
Hmm.
And one thing that really surprised me when I did my research is that he was a 1,000 yard rushing or 1,000 yard rushing running back last season. Over 60% of those yards came after contact. So this dude is
It's
physical,
disgusting.
strong runner, and John Lynch even said in a press conference that he was really underutilized in the passing game in college. But when they saw him at the Senior Bowl doing his one-on-ones in the passing game, he actually showed a lot of skills to be a good receiving back. So I think when you think about it from the perspective of like CMC had a lot of usage last year, they're trying to take that down this year and preserve his career more. I think that this guy could possibly compete with Jordan James for that running back two role. And I'm curious to see what type of looks they would use him in. I know Jordan James on tape probably looks like the better runner, but with this dude, you have more versatility, stronger pass protection. I don't think that it's as bad as a pick as some people think. I think the thing that concerns a lot of people, the one thing I would say is that he's a relatively older prospect. I think he's going to be 25 when the season starts. Um, like I said, limited receiving usage, so we didn't really get to see in game him as a receiving back, but they did fall in love with his tape at the Senior Bowl. He was beating a lot of players in coverage in that. He wasn't invited to the combine because a lot of scouts questioned if he even had upside to be a running back one or two. But when it comes to Kyle Shanahan drafting running backs, obviously there's been a few misses, but relatively this dude knows what he's looking for. At least from a schematic and like a skill perspective. This dude may never end up being a running back one. He might end up not even getting past his rookie contract with us, but at the end of the day, if he can provide productive snaps in both the passing game as a blocker and a receiver and on those runs where we need Christian McCaffrey to get some rest, I think he'll be a good complement to our offense. Um, he's a running back that Kyle Shanahan loves. He's decisive. He's a one cut type of guy. He makes his decisions quick. He doesn't hesitate. He's a low center runner. He can handle taking those physical carries where he's getting beat up by a lot of tacklers. And I think that that's really what we could use in this offense is a running back who's physical, can help reduce CMC's workload.
Mm. I like it. It is definitely an interesting pick. I'm intrigued to see. My biggest question is, does it become predictable when he is out on the field as, okay, this is a passing down? Like I look at it and I'm like, do the Niners trust him to be an actual runner, or do they trust him to be in specific plays that are like, oh, we're going to be in shotgun formation and we just need him to block,
Yeah.
right? Which we've seen that happen with Brock Purdy now is that like we might pass it on first or second down straight from shotgun, um, and McCaffrey will go out. They might even run. Um, both of them in at the same time. They might have Kalen Black and McCaffrey onto the field at the same time, and McCaffrey runs a Texas route and Kalen stays in and blocks. Like that could totally happen. I'm just very curious to see where they trust him in his running because you're right, he runs physically. He kind of reminds me of um, Jordan Mason,
Mhm.
um, which I like. Jordan Mason was a good player for us, but yeah, it's an interesting pick for sure. I mean, we haven't had very much success in round three running backs so far, so I'm a little skeptical on the pick. But I love the same thing about Stribling, right? The physicality, these athletic, just kind
Mhm.
of hard-nosed football players that are just going to put in the work. That was another thing I think too is we'll talk about it a little later, but we drafted a pretty good amount of Indiana players,
Mhm.
as well as undrafted free agents. And I wonder if that says anything about the Kurt Cignetti culture and what Kyle appreciates of these players that buy into the system, buy into the team. And did he, we we see it quite a bit in terms of the drafting philosophy of Niner players, which is they got to have high character. They gotta be a team player and that kind of thing. Which, I appreciate. I think that's a good outlook to have. I mean, we have one of the most devious players currently on our roster, who's not a high character player, who we definitely thought was a high character player, who shall not be named. But that being said, it is a very interesting pick, and hopefully it has some upside, right? It'd be
Mhm.
awesome if we nailed all these picks. All right, round four, 107th pick. Back to the defensive line. We drafted defensive tackle Grayson Halton. Or not, no, he's not, my bad. He's not a defensive tackle. He was on the defensive line, but Grayson Halton, what do you think of Grayson Halton?
I think that he's interesting because he's very athletic. I think that we drafted him to play that role of being a pass rusher on the inside.
Hmm.
Um, he's a little bit of an undersized, kind of leaner. If he were to be as pure defensive tackle, he's a little undersized and leaner for that position, which is interesting because Kyle Shanahan obviously has a tendency to kind of like drafting undersized defensive tackles. But this dude,
Other than Alfred Collins.
yeah, Alfred Collins is yeah, he broke that curse, but
That's a
this dude,
Robert Solid pick. That's why.
he has an explosive first step. He's very athletic. He's really good on stunts and twists, which is something I'm curious to see with how athletic these defensive linemen are that we picked up in the draft. They have a lot of pass rush arsenal. He has a good swim move. He plays with a really high motor. And just overall, he's a strong interior pass rusher. He's shown the ability to bend and turn through contact and win as a pass rusher rather than just somebody who's going to be a pure power defensive tackle who's just going to be there to take up blocks and kind of fill holes.
Hmm.
Um, my concerns with him, like I said, a little undersized or leaner. Um, if he's playing on the inside, that could be a problem against bigger guards. I mean, you saw a few years ago when we were playing the Eagles in the playoffs when Brock Purdy got hurt. Javon Kinlaw and some of our defensive tackles were just getting fucking moved like it was nothing.
Yeah.
So, and Javon Kinlaw's not even that small of a guy. He's definitely not a small defensive tackle. He does have a finesse heavy style for a position that's typically more based on power and violence. He has a little bit of questions on run defense, but I do think when we're thinking from the perspective of like this dude might be subbed in only in packages as a pass rusher, like on third down. Same thing with Romello Height. I think he has a lot of upside in that world. I think when you think about him on the defensive line next to Osa and then Bosa and Romello Height, I think that we have a really athletic front four there that has high pass rush skill. Um, I think he'll definitely be a rotational DT we use in those NASCAR packages, on long downs. I think in like wide and stunt looks as well, he'll thrive. Um, and I think that he's athletic enough that he can be somebody that's stunting from the inside going to the outside and still be an effective pass rusher. So I think there's a lot of versatility there from the pass rush perspective. And I do think that he could always bulk up. He could always be put on looks where he's not always going to be facing a double team and possibly struggling. So I do think that his concerns can be fixed. And I do think as long as we utilize him in the correct spots in the correct context, that he could be a valuable player for us this season. And this was one player that we surprisingly he kind of fell to us. I know he was ranked around the 75 spot and a lot of big boards. He fell to 107, and we were actually shocked that he was even going to be there at 107. So that was definitely nice to see that we got a player that a lot of people agreed was kind of a steal for the draft spot. So
Our one non-reach pick.
yeah,
Fantastic. So glad to hear it. Okay, I like it. Another depth piece for the defensive line.
yep,
Next one. Let's talk about offense real quick. Another back to offense real quick. Round four, pick 127, we drafted an offensive lineman, Carver Willis. Tell me about Carver Willis and what he does he even have an opportunity to play?
I think I think it depends on how training camp goes. I think this is one of those guys that, like Dominic Puny, we didn't know that he would be a starter immediately, but when you look at his profile, like athletically, it was obvious he had potential, given the spot where we drafted him, that he could be a stud. I think with Carver Willis, he's an efficient run blocker. He has good leverage and pop. He has good grip strength. He finishes blocks strong. He doesn't give up on plays early. He gets out of his stance very quick. He's an athletic offensive lineman, and in college he played a lot of tackle, but I do think that he is going to play a lot of guard and center in our offense.
Mhm.
When I think about his fit as a player on our team, I think that he'll fit well as an interior swing offensive lineman. Um, Definitely, I think if I had to presume, I think his best position at the NFL with his skill set would probably be center. He thrives in outside zone, and that's obviously a type of play or a type of run scheme where having quickness, being able to turn at angles, and having good timing matter more than your true length or size.
Yeah.
So I think that there is a chance that he could be a good depth piece for us. Hopefully, with the upside, obviously center is probably our weakest position on the fucking offensive line. Jake Brendel is fucking he's ass. So hopefully he has the upside to possibly be a starting center for us. We'll have to wait and see.
Jake Brendel, man. I don't know who who Bay Area fans hate more, Jake Brendel or Brandon Pajensky. It's really close. It's really close. Um, how much people hate Jake Brendel. Um, and it's even funnier because obviously, like Kyle Shanahan loves that fucking dude. Like I don't know why, but
Has all the
they just
confidence in the world in him.
hate. He must be a really high character guy,
Yeah.
which is why I likes him so much. Okay, interesting pick. I like. It's good. We needed to address some of the offensive line. Clearly, the guard spot was a need. Tackle to guard seems pretty much what we've been doing in previous years. We'll see how the pick turns out. I don't know if he'll start. We also in free agency took some offensive linemen as well, so we'll have some more depth this year, which would be interesting. And maybe you have a chance to get on the field. We know that there's injuries all the time with this team, so he definitely has an opportunity.
Yeah.
Next pick, this is a really interesting one because I think this is probably the biggest swing that we've had in the draft, other than maybe Kalen Black, because I think it actually has some extremely high potential. Round four, pick 139, cornerback, Fisians Prysock. I don't know if I'm saying his name right, the
Mhm.
first part, but tell me about him because his traits seem ridiculous for a cornerback.
Now, if anybody watching this has played college football, you know this dude was an ultimate team demon. He's 6'3" to 6, he's like 6'3" and a half, closer to 6'4". Elite speed. He ran a 4.45 40. He has crazy long arms. On tape, there's a lot of moments where he has really good patience. He has good eye discipline. He's physical at the catch point. He has a good feel in zone. He knows how to use his eyes well. And he's patient at the line of scrimmage. Now, the one thing I will say, or a few things I guess I will say, my concerns with him. Bigger corners in the NFL usually have a tough time transitioning from college football.
Mhm.
It's obviously a whole different level of athletes that you're playing weekly basis. Um, he might have a little bit of a delay in picking up speed because of it, because he has longer movements as a taller, longer player.
Hmm.
And while watching film, there seemed to be he has good discipline for the most part, but when he panics, he has a tendency to get a little grabby and commit flags at the top of routes, which is something that I'm trying to think of the year. I believe it was 20
Ambry Thomas.
Ambry Thomas, that the year we had Josh Norman at corner as well.
Oh man, that was a
It,
classic.
it
That
felt
was
like every deep shot was fucking defensive pass interference. Bro,
I was just basically holding up the yellow card from soccer every time it was past Josh Norman's way. Be like, all right, here comes the flag.
yeah. But then this dude locked in and locked up Devontae Adams in that NFC Championship game. That was generational performance. But that's definitely the biggest trend that I'm worried about a little bit with him is just him kind of panicking sometimes at plays when he gets beat. But I think when you look at him as a player, right, like imagine if this dude develops and he's going to be playing a lot of zone. He's not going to be playing a lot of man, so that definitely makes things easier.
Yeah.
If this dude develops and we have a cornerback room, I would presume we probably move off of Renardo Green if this dude develops into a starter. If we had Lenore and Prysock on the outside, and then Upton Stout in the nickel or slot spot, or even Nate Hobbs, we have good cornerback depth right now. And I think that this dude, he
We
he
drafted this guy higher than Diamador Lenore, by the way.
yeah, and I think that he could develop into a really strong outside corner and zone. And when you compare him with other NFL corners in the past, he kind of has Richard Sherman style like length and size. And obviously Richard Sherman fucking thrived in our offense and he was far
Offense,
less,
defense. Yeah.
or, yeah, defense, but he was far less of an athlete than Prysock is, respectfully. I mean,
Yeah.
we saw Sammy Watkins just do him dirty in the Super Bowl, like just burn him over and over again.
Yeah.
But I think this gives us a corner who can really match up with those really big receivers. The first receiver that would come in my head would be like, oh, a guy like Mike Evans, but obviously he's on our team now. He played well in quarters and cover three. Obviously, the Niners play a lot of cover three. Um, and I think that even if he doesn't play on defense particularly early, he can be somebody that can be really good on special teams as well. And while he's cleaning up his technique and penalties, that's a spot where he could possibly thrive too. So I think this is a really high upside pick.
I want to ask what you think about, do you think he could transition to safety?
I think that it's possible, but I think he would have to gain some size a little bit because I think that he's only around 196 pounds. I think that he has the size and the athleticism and the ability to play zone and the discipline to play safety.
Hmm.
I do think that when it comes from a tackling perspective, he'll need to develop a little more. But that could be a spot where he finds some success on our team because our safety room is obviously fucking horrible for the most part. I mean, Mustafa's okay, but other than that, it's burnt toast everywhere. But yeah,
It's
high upside pick right there.
we are not we are really shitty on the safety. I want to give them a little bit of grace, and the only reason why is our defensive line was so atrocious last year that I almost think it just put such a spotlight on coverage because we were having to cover for so goddamn long.
Mm.
And especially with safeties, I mean, yes, there was absolutely lapse in judgments and completely cutting routes and over the top passes that should just never happen in the safety position. But I do think so much like they need to get a little bit of leeway given how bad our pass rush was. Um, Mustafa, I think yeah, we know Mustafa he was a great rookie, got injured at the end of his season. We typically know that when players have some sort of injury, especially at late in the end of the season, even when they come back for the next season, it takes some time to adjust back to NFL speed. So I'm hoping that he'll be a lot better this upcoming year with a full off season and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Um, but I'm very curious. I mean, Marquis Siegel too. He had some moments. We'll see. It's definitely a weaker room. It could definitely get better, and we did not really address it in the draft at all, which is another thing that people were pissed about, which makes sense. Um, But we'll see. We'll see what happens there. I'm very interested about the Price Hawk pick too. I think it has an extremely high upside. It could also be just one of those whiffs. I could totally see him just being cut like after the year.
Yeah.
it really is kind of like a really high risk, high reward, or he's done so type pick. Round, let's go to the next pick, another round four pick, 154th overall. This one's an interesting one. Linebacker Jaden Duggar. Tell
Mhm.
me about Jaden Duggar.
So I think it's interesting because this guy used to play safety and he moved to linebacker. He has really good frame and length for the position. He's 6'5", 242 pounds, and he ran a 4.640. 35-inch vertical with a 7-foot wingspan. This dude's got a 2K My Player build height. Um, Stats on the season, he had 125 tackles, 13 tackles for loss, 4 sacks. He has good coverage upside versus tight ends. He has pass rush tools as a linebacker. He could be a special team standout for us. I think that there's an argument to be made that this dude possibly could have the highest upside out of any pick in the draft. I mean, you could just imagine with that athletic profile, if this dude could develop well in coverage, he could be a beast for us. And when you think about possibly not Fred Warner, but Dre Greenlaw being on a 1-year contract, nobody knows how this year's going to go. Maybe he gets injured. Maybe he goes to a different team next year after having a great season and chases the bag. We don't know what's going to happen. Um, but this dude obviously could possibly fill that role if he develops. And I think my concerns with him is that he kind of had a 1-year breakout in college, didn't receive a combine invite. He needs to bulk a little more, I think, for the linebacker position because he still has that very athletic frame. But the size definitely could help with the physicality of the NFL. And I think that transitioning from safety to linebacker, it's been slightly a little bit of a struggle for him to develop to defending the run in that position and consistently doing that. But once again, that's something that obviously can be fixed at the NFL level and developed. I think when you think about his fit with the Niners, he's obviously a project player a little bit with high upside. But when you think about the position he'll play, he can play that Sam coverage linebacker position. We just traded away D Winters. So now we add another guy like D Winters who's extremely athletic, but on top of that, he has pass rush tools and he can play well in underneath zones. So I think that this guy could have high upside for us. I don't imagine him playing like this year that much, but I do think it could be a situation where I mean, even like Dre Greenlaw played a fairly big role in his rookie season, but in his second and third year, that's really when he broke out as like, wow, this dude is actually an elite linebacker. So it'll be interesting to see how he develops and the spots that we use him in. I could see him being a special teams profile to start the year, but who knows? Like you said, like there's always injuries going on with the Niners. Who knows where he'll get plugged in a Raheem Morris defense? It'll be interesting to see. But definitely really high upside on this pick.
What do you think this does to Nick Martin, though?
I think it's interesting because I think that D Winters getting traded might show that the team is having some develop or like confidence in his development, Nick Martin's. But I do think that Nick Martin's biggest problem on the field was that he played a little antsy at times. He always plays like his hair is on fire, but that's not always the best possible thing. You saw how Dre Greenlaw really developed that into being controlled and playing good coverage and playing disciplined. When a guy plays with his hair on fire and he's not really disciplined, kind of like Hufanga when Hufanga was first playing with us. Hufanga developed a lot better in coverage, and not saying he's the best in coverage out of every safety in the NFL, but at first that dude would sometimes have plays where you're just saying like, dude, like you're trying to jump a route, you're trying to play with your instincts so hard
Yeah.
you end up getting beat by double moves, by different routes. Um, I definitely think if Nick Martin can develop on that end, that it'll be interesting to see because they also developed or they drafted Nick Martin with the idea of replacing Dre Greenlaw. So obviously
Yeah.
they saw a lot of similarities in their play style and how they fit on the defense, but I'm definitely interested to see where this guy would be playing.
Yeah. I think Jaden Duggar starts on special teams. Seems like a classic special teams type player. Go hit some people, run,
Mhm.
tackle. If you have an opportunity to get on the field in some packages, he'll play. Um, like you said, very, very high upside if he gets the opportunity. Um, that's just the thing with Niner drafts is opportunity is very scarce unless it kind of presents itself to it, and typically that's because of injuries.
Yeah.
Um, but also like I think it is under talked about in terms of like I don't necessarily think you look at round four, round five type picks, even sometimes round three, as these are going to be your starting level players, or these are going to be your they're going to play their first year.
Hmm.
Um, it round three to like round six and seven is such a crapshoot in the draft of where where you plug and play players, where you redshirt some players just because you already have the depth at that position, right?
Yeah.
Linebacker, bringing back Dre and Fred and considering health and everything like that, if that goes well, like this guy is not going to see the field at all. I mean, we know what happened last time we had Dre and Fred on the field at the same time, healthy. It was absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, and even if we run a three down linebacker package, that could be Nick Martin, that could be Tatum, but like we actually have a ridiculous amount of linebacker depth. So I don't really see Jaden Duggar getting the field unless some crazy stuff happens.
Yeah.
But maybe he shines, right? That's just the thing about these picks is like training camp comes around and you're like, holy crap, like we drafted like something we never thought would even be possible, and all of a sudden he becomes a starter, right? Just kind of how it happens.
I mean, you look at like when we had Aziz as well, nobody really thought Aziz was going to be an elite linebacker because he was behind those two. But when he got the opportunity to play, they were like, okay, he was actually pretty good. And then you see him go to a different team, and this dude is obviously a stud. I mean, he literally today just signed a 3-year contract for I think like $54 million, something like that. Or I don't
We
remember.
didn't sign Aziz, did we? Or was he an undrafted?
I'm not sure where he was drafted. He might have been.
We did not draft him.
Yeah,
Or if we did, he might have been an undrafted free agent.
I think he was an undrafted free agent, but
Ridiculous.
like it just shows that opportunities to present itself, and Aziz didn't get the chance to start fully when Fred and Dre were healthy, but at the end of the day, it's important to have that depth in case those injuries do
Yeah.
come. Because let's say Fred did get injured one of those years, we would have had a very strong backup linebacker right behind him that would have filled that hole well. So I definitely think that this could be a pick that maybe next year or 2 years from now could end up being a guy who really gets some important downs or possibly plays a lot because of an injury.
Yeah. Aziz was undrafted, signed by the Niners in 2019.
Yeah.
And I don't remember him seeing the field until probably like 2021.
Yeah.
So, yeah, goes to show there.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about our last pick. Round five, 179th overall, another offensive lineman, Enrique Cruz Jr. Tell me a little bit about him
This dude is an insane athlete. So
for an offensive
obviously,
lineman.
a lot of people know about the relative athletic score that they do in the draft from the combine stats. It's a score that
Mhm.
they put together on a scale of 1 to 10. Um, this dude ranked third out of almost 2,000 offensive guards since
Dude was moving.
dude, he's 6'5", 313 pounds. He runs a 4.94 40 with a 35-inch vertical.
That isn't that crazy to think that that big ass motherfucker can run faster than us?
And with a 35-inch vertical too, being that heavy is fucking crazy. He's explosive. He has controlled footwork. He has good balance when it comes to making contact with defensive linemen. He's a strong core. And when you think about this guy being a pull blocker, moving in the outside zone, this dude's athletic and big as fuck. So that could be something that if he ever sees the field and develops correctly, he could really thrive in those outside zone looks in our offense. My concerns with him, one of those picks that the Niners make where he has a lot of intangible tools, athletic tools, but he's not really a polished prospect yet. I know a lot of people said they think this was one of the worst draft picks that we've made this year. Um, but I do think that with his athletic profile, obviously I think his athletic profile exceeded his tape. I mean, it's hard to imagine a linebacker being that athletic and also being that elite and falling to this late of a fucking round.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that even as a developmental backup, he might end up getting some touches. If injuries happen, he might end up thriving if he can just develop a little more. I don't imagine him being somebody who's going to be good his first year, but who knows what he'll look like in a few years. And with that athletic profile, that's a lot of upside if he can develop. And if he doesn't, at worst, it was a fifth round pick that we kind of wasted. But I think that he'll definitely be an offensive guard in our offense. Um, he has pretty rare movement, obviously, as an offensive lineman. But to start, I think he'll probably be a practice squad type of guy. And if his technique catches up to his traits, he will probably be a very good offensive lineman.
Well, I'm
So,
not worried in terms of learning how to be a better offensive line. I mean, we have Chris Forrester's a great offensive line coach, so he has all the athleticism to become elite if he wants to be. It's just more of how is he going to take, how is he going to learn to actually develop the fundamentals and yeah, develop a technique in being a great offensive lineman, right?
mhm.
Um, it's an interesting pick. Round five is typically where we get the gems, so it'd be kind of hilarious if we were somehow able to solidify our guard spot from a round five pick here with Enrique,
Yeah,
because he's just an athletic demon. Um, God, putting him next to Trent Williams would be ridiculous. If we had like Trent Williams from like 3, 4 years ago swinging out on run blocks and Enrique, can you just imagine two 300-pound just
IHOP, just straight pancakes.
it'd be awesome. Yeah, we'll see. But very interesting draft as a whole. Let's get into, I kind of want to talk about real quick. What would you consider? What's the best value pick for you?
I think Grayson Holton. I think that when you consider where a lot of the consensus had him in the draft, you watch his tape. He obviously has strong interior pass rush traits, and he was a productive player. And I think that he gives us surplus value in a premium role where we were really lacking last year.
Hmm.
And I know we got Osa obviously for the same reason, but this just gives us more depth and more rotational pieces for those type of packages where you really want to commit to pass rush.
Yeah. Yeah. Worst value pick for you.
Probably Kalon Black, just because a lot of people thought he would be either extremely late round pick or maybe not even get drafted at all. And I also think he might struggle to see playing time, even though I am a fan of his tape and his skill set. I just think that, like you said earlier, playing behind CMC, and they also said Jordan James is going to get a good amount of carries this season. He might struggle to see playing time. So we'll have to see how that works out.
Who is your ready now player?
I think Romello Height definitely going to get plugged in immediately. In those NASCAR packages. He has proven pass rush production. He had the second highest pressure rate in all of college football last year, only behind Ruben Bain, who was obviously one of the best in the country.
Hmm.
And I think he automatically has a defined situational role on our defense too.
It's good. And lastly, what would be your most like upside type pick?
Definitely Stribling. Um, I think that when you take his combination of size, blocking, run after the catch ability, and vertical ability as well, he could be a very dangerous weapon for us if his route
Hmm.
continues to develop and he develops that nuance to go against zone. And obviously, I think that his speed is something that we've been lacking for years in the wide receiver room.
It's good. It's good to hear. So, given that, in terms of I know we touched upon it a little bit even after the beginning before we even talked about the picks, but what is your overall thoughts about this draft class? What would you grade? What would you grade the class?
I would give it a solid B, but I
Okay.
think with the amount of players that we picked with really high upside, it has the potential to be something like an A minus. I think there's obviously, like we said earlier, it's obvious they were trying to draft scheme fits. I think that they have some elite scheme fits here across the board. Stribling is a yak and blocking wide receiver. Kalon Black is an inside zone and pass protection running back. Um, Romello Height and Halton, they're pass rush pieces for our NASCAR packages. Our offensive lineman picks were very athletic zone movement athletes.
Hmm.
Price has the potential to be an elite long cover three corner. And I think that like you said earlier about culture with Indiana, it's kind of reinforcing our identity because we're leaning into speed, yards after the catch, having a physical run game, having pass rush, and length on defense. And I think that our mid-round picks, if any of them hit, all of them have extremely high upside. So that's something that I'm really excited about. I think overall, it was very intentional that they're drafting with roster building in mind. High floor as a class because of the athletics tape, but also the scheme fit. And I think, like I said earlier, if it's developed correctly, this class can really be viewed as great in a few years.
It's good. I like the grade. I'm a little lower. I'm gonna say a C plus.
Mhm.
Um, I, as you mentioned, I do think there is a high upside in some of the players we picked, and as I mentioned before, and you just talked about it, is there was some intention I think in this draft more than I think I have seen in past ones. I am just a little bit concerned at some of what we might have reached for. Is also just given the fact that we it does seem that we drafted some older players,
Mhm.
and so we are maybe that intention with drafting older players is you're drafting more ready now players, like players who have had more college experience. They're ready for that. They should be ready for the NFL level sooner. But I am a little bit concerned that when you do draft those older players and they don't pan out, like they are just busts and they're past their primes in a couple years and that kind of thing. Um, so I give it a C plus. I think it's got the potential to be great draft class. But given the PTSD of our previous drafts, like I don't know if the dam will break and all of a sudden like it would I think it would be hilarious just given all of the media attention surrounding the specific Niners draft class. It just seems like the fan base is like just completely crumbled. Like they have given up. It's like this was the um what's the word called? This was the last straw. Like
Yep.
drafting this class was like, okay, they need to fire everyone. They can't draft for crap. And I would find it hilarious if this actually ends up being the draft class that's like saves John Lynch.
Mhm.
And be like, wow, look at that. We told you it was
Yeah.
gonna be great. I think it would shut a lot of people up, which would be really funny.
Yeah.
Just to see like people. I that's my like favorite thing. Um, is like looking back at people's like old tweets and seeing like how their minds just completely get changed off of just something that happens. So it would be kind of hilarious if this draft class ends up actually being like very good.
Yeah. I agree.
But yeah, so this was a good episode in terms of talking about the pod and or not the pod, talking about the draft. Um, and we'll be taking a little bit of a break, I think. We'll figure out what we want to talk about next. We'll see what kind of drama there is. Actually, let's cut that part. Last thing that I want to ask you about is there has been some development with Brandon Ayuk. And I feel like we haven't talked about Brandon Ayuk on this pod yet. It was announced today that the Commanders are interested in him, but they are not willing to trade for him, and they're literally just waiting until the Niners release him. There was also a report today that Brandon Ayuk has been unavailable to contact from not just the Niners, but from other teams that are interested in trading for him, supposedly. And I just want to get your opinion on like what do the Niners do? Um, very curious what you, I have my thoughts. But I'll let you go first.
I think it's interesting because I think we kind of shot ourselves in the foot a little bit by, I think with the whole situation that happened, if we're being unbiased, there's probably fault on both parts, right? I think the contract negotiations, I don't like how Brandon Ayuk handled it initially with the whole posting a video of FaceTiming Jaden Daniels being like, they don't want me back. And then like him watching that, like he was obviously trying to be like, I'm gonna be a commander, I'm gonna be a commander. Then we re-sign him, and then obviously he doesn't play well because he was holding out in training camp. He didn't get in shape perfectly. He was dropping a lot of passes. Then he gets injured. I think that we're at fault for trying to trade him after that injury because it was very apparent that Jed York was kind of like, yo, this dude might not be worth his money. Let's get him out of here while we can. And Brandon Ayuk obviously took that personally. But then I think the like attempt by the Niners to kind of and obviously he does have some character flaws. We're not going to sit here and pretend he's been perfectly normal in this whole process.
Wouldn't consider him a high character
Yeah,
player.
But I think if we had the plan to trade him, I don't understand the reason why we'd run a smear campaign on him and then be like, "Hey guys, do you guys want Brandon Ayuk?" It's like we just made him look like shit to the rest of the league, like a terrible person. And then now no everybody's like, "Why would we trade for this guy?" And everybody knows eventually we're gonna have to release him because there's no way they're gonna want to keep that contract on books.
Yeah.
Um, there's no way they're just gonna have him take up a fucking roster spot. So
So
that's the
there's
thing.
that's what I want to talk to you about though, because so there is the Niners still have leverage because the predicament, well, not the predicament, but where they're at in this case is they do not need to release him to the very end. And even then, if he doesn't report, because from my understanding, you actually have to report to the team in order to be able to be released
Mhm.
for your contract, whatever. So what can happen is they can hold on to him up until practically very close to when the season starts. And if he doesn't report before, then he goes on what is considered the non-reported players list, and they don't have they hold, basically hold his contract hostage without him taking a roster spot, without him getting paid anything. So if he doesn't report, which knowing how Brandon Ayuk has been, who is literally unreachable, doesn't talk to the Niners, is he will physically have to report to the Niners in order to actually be released. And if I'm the Niners, I'm thinking you don't. There, you're right in the sense that both sides have played somewhat of a part in this, and I think the smear campaign and a lot of it is I think is also doesn't help that like the media itself was also driving like all of these just kind of like whirlwind of assumptions and people caught up to those assumptions and then the Niners had to like debunk that but then like this wasn't debunked and so it just became a thing of like well like is there tension? Is there not? Are they trading him? Are they not? Like this kind of thing, right? And so it became like a smear campaign because there was so many rumors going on. And but I also don't look at it from a perspective if you're looking at it from the team of this guy screwed you. Like legitimately like he went through this whole rabbit hole of wanting to get paid or wanting to be paid, then didn't want to be paid and wanted to be traded, then didn't take the trade when we were like, okay, we'll trade you. Then we pay him a ridiculous amount of money. He shows up, doesn't really care too much, gets injured, then doesn't really give a rat's ass about coming back or wanting to play for the team anyways. So like from the team perspective, you're like, this guy has only like screwed us, not just in contracts, but just in general from the sense of like we paid you on the intention of like you were going to be our wide receiver. We were building our room around you.
Mhm.
And now we're in a position where we had to create like a different wide receiver room. We had to work with what we had because of in spite of you.
Mhm.
And now you're not just going to get rid of that caliber of a player. As annoying as he is a phenomenal football player when before he got injured. You're not just going to give that away for free,
No.
right? You can't give that away for free. So you're going to hold on to that for as long as you can because you don't want to give like especially an NFC West team where you're just going to give the Commanders just like all right here you go like have them whatever like you're going to hold on to that contract to because you don't want to be giving another team an advantage um, when you still hold that power you
Mhm.
know so it's going to be interesting to see what happens later in the offseason when like he is required to report in order to be released and we're not going to find out about like this saga is going to continue, and maybe he gets. I mean, I doubt he gets traded at this point. I don't think any team would want to trade for him. I don't. I mean, the fact that even Washington, I honestly think, is willing to wait till he possibly gets released, um, and pick him up. Like, I don't even know if that's successful, just because he's playing with Jaden Daniels. Like, I don't look at that as like this is a dude who literally looks out of shape, hasn't played. He will have not played football for a year and a half like that in what was his prime. I mean, he was entering his prime in his after his contract year.
And he's like 28 now.
Yeah, like what is he? He's a little. Wait, how old is Debo? God damn, Debo must be
He
old as
was like
hell.
29, 30.
God, Debo Samuel's an old ass. Oh God, he's 30. Oh yeah, Debo's cooked, man. Yeah, Debo's cooked. He's gonna have to retire. He's got the body of like a 38-year-old because the way he played, which respect to him. But yeah, I'm very interested to see what they do with it. I selfishly I hope they hold on to him as long as possible. Like if he's gonna get released, he better get released like literally the day before uh like the NFL season like literally starts. It'd be hilarious.
Yeah.
So um but yeah, okay. That concludes this episode, y'all. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. We'll probably just be kind of thinking about some other things. We might do some tier lists, look at kind of talk about some more news that happens through the off season.
Hmm.
We'll probably take a look at our undrafted free agents as well, see if there's any ones that stands out. We'll talk about them in the next pod. But other than that, thank you for joining. Everyone have a good night, and we'll see you next time.